Well, welcome to episode 7 in season 2 of C.A.R.s, Coffee and Christ. It's our weekly podcast discussion with the team here at Automotive Royale, and I'm your host, Ross Turner, and I serve as the chaplain here at C.A.R. In today's episode, we are going to be talking about kind of conceptually about the challenges presented by what's commonly referred to in today's culture as hustle culture. Hustle culture that is kind of a culture that glorifies the hustle, the grind. It's also, I think, worshiping work. It tends to minimize rest and even sees sleep as some kind of idleness, obstacle to overcome. Often even sleep as laziness. There's a famous phrase people use that they'll sleep when they're dead. There's something to that comes from the understanding of how work is to be approached as well. So given all this and given this kind of culture that we find ourselves in today, how can we find rest? And has God built rest into the creation so that we will enjoy it more? And we're going to kind of answer those questions today. How has God designed our lives for work and for rest as part of His design for us to worship Him? So with me today, it's the three of us today with some coffee. We have Ray Lawson here, our business manager, and we're so thankful Ray's made it this morning. And we've also got Abby King, who's our COO and co-founder here, co-owner as well. And Abby's actually the one that brought up the subject that she wanted to talk about this. So I've tried my best to put together something that we can discuss, and hopefully this will make sense to you, our listeners, as we think about something called the Sabbath. And it does seem to be conceptually challenging in a lot of ways. People misuse it, fail to use it, use it for the wrong reasons, avoid it, all sorts of things. And I think we want to give some very simple answers to this and give some practical insights to help you understand how to find rest in this kind of hustle culture we find ourselves in. So I thought we'd start today by just asking what's kind of behind this trend. Because I think, Americans have always honored hard work. It's not an issue as much of hard work. It goes beyond that, I think. It's this kind of culture that tries to squeeze every moment into work and work into every waking moment. That's kind of the hustle culture we're talking about. So it kind of goes beyond having good work ethic. It goes further into having a grind and having a side hustle as well. That's just what people in probably not exactly my generation, but maybe the generation after me. But I think even now, my generation is starting to adapt and to adopt that kind of mentality, I think. So what do you all think's behind that philosophy of working in that way, where you're always trying to fit more work in, goes beyond good work ethic into this kind of grind and hustle culture? What do you think is behind that kind of phenomenon in your mind? That's what we're going to start with today.
I just find it interesting that the word grind, like to grind something is to wear something down.
Yes, that's the weird term for it.
And I honestly don't know where this whole cultural thing of feeling like you're always having to work. If you're not working, it's equated with being lazy. Even feeling like you have to monetize hobbies. Right? Like I know so many people that they have a hobby and then it's, I'm going to sell it on that rather than just enjoying the craft. Right? And I mean, I'm guilty of that as well. Having owned a jewelry business in the past, but, it is always in the back of your mind of, I know how to do this and make this. Can I make money from it? Rather than just purely enjoying a hobby, or even being involved in some kind of artistic endeavor and feeling like it is not necessarily of value unless you monetize it. Right? I'm not sure. I think that's probably why I brought up the subject.
No, that's great. I think that's a good insight. Like you're saying, the term itself, grind, is this very toilsome, wearisome word, right? But people use that as like the term for their primary vocation, mostly today. That's really what people just kind of casually call it. I do think that's interesting that you brought up that it's also how people think of their hobbies as work and as some way of promoting, pursuing commerce. That's interesting too, because I do think you're right about that, because I think everything has become monetized, literally everything.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe it's the sense of leisure activity has been lost, I think, in culture. The idea that there's time to just relax, or there's time to do something when you're not on vacation, maybe, because vacation is this kind of very, very formal way of promoting leisure, right? But it seems like, well, what else do we do if we're not working? Right? So it seems like there's some kind of void that people are trying to fill, and instead of using it as leisure, they're trying to find more work to do, or additional things to monetize as well. So that's it. Maybe you're right about that. It's like how or why do people monetize their hobbies today? That is a weird phenomenon in a way. So, Ray, any thoughts that you might have about this kind of phenomenon? Like, why do people, again, this is probably maybe a little younger generations than ours that kind of think more like this, but it's definitely trickling down into older generations. It definitely is making its way into that. People are working longer in their lives than ever before, and people that like are in retirement don't retire. Yeah. So, what are your thoughts?
Well, my wife, she's a little younger than me.
Yeah.
And she's one of those constant movers as well.
Yeah.
She, even like you said, with hobbies, it's working. Like one of her hobbies is she loves doing hair. She went to school for it. She's great at it. But she does it as a second occupation.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people that grew up in church, or possibly grew up around people that were in church, there's always a verse that kind of stuck out with me, and it was Proverbs 16:27. I have it here in a couple different. So idle hands are the devil's workshop.
Yeah.
Idle lips are his mouthpiece.
Yeah.
Okay, and if you look at it in the NIV version, it says a worthless man's devices digs up evil.
Yeah.
And the words of his lips are like a scorching fire. So I think that sometimes, it's kind of been instilled or inbred in someone that if you take idle time, if you're not doing good work, you're lazy, you are ineffective, you are worthless.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people, their worth is in what they can accomplish. And so many people zero in on that, and they work so hard that they basically forget to live.
Yep. Yeah, that's right. That's great, Ray. I think you're right. I think there's this kind of misconception, or maybe this misapplication of what idleness is, because there's a difference between rest and idleness.
Correct.
Right? Like idleness is like you're literally doing nothing without any purpose, and then you find yourself into a pit of some kind, or you get yourself into something that's just wrongful, right? Because it'll find you when you're idle, right? Like if, when you're younger, especially, if you don't pursue the right friends, the wrong ones will find you. Like it's just kind of how it works when you're idle, right? And that's kind of been misunderstood as rest in a way too. Like rest then gets interpreted as idleness. In fact, I think that's probably the common issue for religious people, is they kind of conflate the two things. This kind of, I'm going to rest, and suddenly it's like, I'm doing nothing. No, rest is still doing something, right? You're still doing something when you rest. It's an intentional activity, right? So I think that's probably part of it, especially in our generation where rest is looked at and idleness is really a great sin, especially in American culture. In our generations, resting is really considered almost sinful in a way, like you're not producing something, right? And like you said, the value that you have diminishes as well, which is terrible, right? So yeah, I think you both kind of hit on the head. There's a little bit of the younger culture kind of sees, well, let me monetize everything in my life. which that's not quite how older people think, right? But we're more fighting against this. Hey, we've got to not be lazy. We've got to not kind of be idle. This could be sinful. This could be wrong. So there's kind of two different pieces, I think, behind that both tap into what's going on with this culture that makes rest like this obstacle. It gets in the way. That's really good. Well, I thought we maybe do one more question here, just kind of thinking through this phenomenon before we kind of get into like how does God design us, right? And I know that some are in side hustles because they've just got to make it work. It's not a luxury; it's a necessity in their lives. And I think that's common. I get that, but it tends to dominate life. Work starts to dominate life. It spills over into family time. It becomes no family time. It takes Sundays away from them. They're always working on Sunday, and then it keeps them from any kind of real rest or any kind of Sabbath, even if it's not on Sunday, any kind of Sabbath. So when does work need boundaries? When is it appropriate to have boundaries in work? Because this kind of culture says there are no boundaries. We have no boundaries with work. We just say yes to everything we were supposed to do and, create more and more jobs for ourselves. But when is it necessary to have boundaries for work? When do we say, no, this is where work stops? How do we answer that question before getting into like God's design, like just practical sense? Like how do we say yes to work intentionally and then no to work with some boundaries? What do you all think?
I think this is a hard question.
Yeah. Boundaries are a tough one. I think too, especially like when it comes to business, especially in times there are seasons when you have to get projects done. Yeah. When there are goals to accomplish, and there are seasons when you may be working more than normal. And finding the balance of that. It's a difficult question. Yeah, it's hard when there are times in work that it demands more from you, right? And so the boundaries have to still, be discussed in a way, right? But the amount of time invested will be much higher, right? This is why some people often, employ people on a salary basis, and then it becomes, hey, this is going to be a month where you're putting in 50, 60 hours a week, right? Or some people pay people hourly, full-time hourly, so that they can protect people from that, right? So there are, the employer provides boundaries from the upfront, right? When I was a restaurant manager for many years, you just get salaried so they can ask you to work as long as you want, whenever you want, but there was no protection for the employee. Right. You're working 65, 70 hours every single week, and that was the boundary. There was none, really. Right. I'd be there from 2 p.m. to 3 a.m. every day, and then you'd have one day off every 10 days. And it's like, that's not conducive for any kind of life.
Right.
Your marriage, who has that? Everyone in that industry was divorced, except for me. So it's just, I think, again, like there's good ways of setting boundaries, and there's basically, we have no boundaries. Yeah. Right. So I think even when there's high volume of work, there's still some boundary discussion. Yeah. Right.
And I think too, there's like, even in that, there is an understanding in most periods that there are times of, okay, this is when you're working late. Yeah. But then when you know that it's not in that busy period, that you are sticking with, okay, normal hours, normal time off, not expecting that the same thing. It's like if you are an accountant, that in the spring and around April and March you are going to be crazy, but then you also know that there's a reprieve. Yeah. Right. So I think knowing that there is a reprieve after the busy period is always nice.
Yeah, and that's a way to maybe establish some boundaries, even during those times. To understand that boundaries are getting expanded here, but then they're gonna come back, contract and come back, right? In a level, again, I think that's a good way of kind of thinking through even boundaries during busy periods. But what happens when people don't provide boundaries? What happens to life when there aren't boundaries, or there's not even a discussion about them, and work has this kind of boundarylessness to it? What happens in your all's view when that is the case with work? And it's not just work, it becomes more than work. It becomes your life, right? What happens to you? What happens to people when work becomes boundaryless and limitless? So, Ray, you want to take a stab?
Sure. I think it becomes a situation where people feel one side or the other that they're being taken advantage of.
Yeah.
Is what it kind of boils down to.
Yeah.
The expectation is greater on one side than it is communicated on the other. I think that when it's boundaryless, I mean, that it becomes almost like, the Wild Wild West.
Yeah.
There's no structure. There's no, and what ends up happening is it becomes animosity. It becomes hurt feelings, hard feelings. It becomes resentment. There becomes, people become begrudging and things like that. And then it also, not just from the employer to the employee, it becomes within the employees, because you have people that, some people that maybe thrive on that excessive work.
Yeah.
And then you have others that are like, no, my limit's here.
Yeah.
And then you have, this person saying, okay, well, you're not fulfilling your end.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to. Just because you're doing more doesn't mean that
I'm not doing enough.
That I'm not doing enough. Exactly.
Yep.
But throughout all of that, I think the biggest thing is the communication.
Yeah.
If, whatever the boundaries are, they have to be communicated well, and that's from both situations. If an employee has a situation where they are restricted, either physically, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, whatever it may be. If you have a person who is dedicated to going to church every Sunday morning, and you're as an employer, you're saying, well, I need you to work. Well, that employee stands their ground and says, no, I'm going to church on Sunday because that's, it's the time I'm giving to the Lord.
Yep.
If the employee doesn't, relent to that, then obviously there's friction there. So there has to be give and take. There has to be communication. But when it's wide open like that, it just creates a lot of situations. And I've been on both sides of it. As an employee and as an employer, trying to get people to get certain things accomplished. Yeah. And you have the employees that are saying, well, I have a life. Yeah. And I've been in a situation where I've been the employee that the employer is expecting me to work, 90, 120 days in a row. And I'm like, I have no clean undergarments. I mean, I don't like coming to work because I'm not home long enough to do a load of laundry. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, it can be very inducive to failure. Yes. Is really what it boils down to if it's not done correctly.
That's really good points, Ray, of just practically, we're not built to work like that. Most things aren't built to work like that. Right. Everything has to have some kind of rest in its design to continue to function, let alone have maintenance work done on it, right? In the same street of people, right? And so there's this sense of like, we're not built to work like that. Even if it's an occasional season, it still catches up with you, right? So there's a sense of like communication, design. These things go into like, hey, we're not machines, right? We're just not. We're organic creations, relational creatures, social creatures. We're built to work some, but we're also needing sleep. That's part of the need. Sleep's not some result of sin. Darkness and sleep are part of the creation. So it's like that's kind of how God made us. So there's this kind of limited quality to being a human being. And getting too theological, the reality is we are tempted to sin by trying to break those limits. Satan's like, do this, God's holding on to you. There's something more. He's holding you back. No, he's asking us to live within the limits that he gave us. And the temptation is those limits are bad. Those boundaries are wrong. He's limitless for a reason. You need to tap into that. No, we're limited. We're small, but that's a good thing. That's still significant, right? So there's a sense of that pressing up against the boundaries tends to press up against our design and kind of unravel it. In fact, I think a little bit there. So tapping on some really good stuff there. This is really, I've always loved this psalm. This has helped me a lot kind of recalibrate here on, okay, just the principle of what we're talking about today. This has helped me a lot. It's from Psalm 127. It says, unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. It is in vain that you rise up early and go late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil, for he gives his beloved sleep. All right. So God says, hey, there's more to it than just work. There's a vocation here, right? This vocation is this kind of calling that God calls you to do something in the world that's technically his world, right? However, he's also said, if you do it with me, it's not going to feel always like toil, right? I'm going to give you some sleep, right? I'm going to give you rest. But if you do it without me, trying to build a city, trying to build your kingdom, right? He says it's going to feel like anxiety. It's going to feel like toil. It's going to feel like you're eating that as your sustaining life instead of me. Jesus says, give us this day our daily bread. He says, if you don't do it with me, it's going to feel like you're eating anxiety every day. That's literally what the psalm is saying. I think we can all relate to that, right? So I think the question here is, what might be some practical lessons to learn from that? I mean, it's just a really good recalibration to hear that from God. What's some practical lessons to say, okay, this is what he wants me to consider with work and how he wants me to approach sleep? What do you all think about that? What might be some practical takeaways from, hey, unless God builds the house, unless God builds the city, you're going to be laboring in vain and eating toil all day long. What do you all think about that? What might be some lessons to take away from that?
Well, I think practically not villainizing rest.
Yes.
Just start there.
Yeah.
Seeing it as a gift and a necessity instead.
Yep.
And putting it in place.
Yeah.
If you are an individual that struggles with finding rest naturally, sleeping naturally, taking breaks, then write it into your calendar.
That's right.
As boring and as lame as that sounds, say, okay, set my alarm to actually go to bed early.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
I will take a 20-minute nap.
Yeah. So one, just thinking differently about rest and sleep, and then two, planning for it might be a good takeaway. I mean, that sounds simple. Not simple. Not simple for people that are hardwired to constantly be moving or constantly be thinking or constantly be engaging something, right? Or being stimulated by something. That's not a simple thing to calendar,
right?
But that's, I think, a necessary application. Like, I've got to find a way to sleep. I've got to find a way to make sure I don't think of it in a negative way. That's really good, Abby. Great. What do you think? Any practical takeaways from this? Hey, God's saying, hey, don't pursue this without me, or you're going to be eating toil all day long. Right?
I think sometimes that's the thing that's the most difficult to understand. Is that, and you hear people talk about it a lot. I do it. I mean, because it's kind of. It's kind of what comes to mind whenever you're doing something good. It's that it's God's plan.
Yeah.
So if it's God's plan, then we're going to need to do whatever it takes to fulfill God's plan.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that, unfortunately, I think sometimes we mistake our plan for God's plan. And we go into the excessive side, trying to accomplish. We don't get me wrong. I mean, everything that we're doing about it in our mind and our heart and our body is good. It's something that we see that, and we see, and while we're doing it, we even actually at times see the Lord move within it. But is that ultimately his plan?
Yeah.
That's where I think we end up with some confusion.
Yeah.
And I think that's where sometimes it becomes excessive.
Yeah.
Because there's a song from DC Talk. It's called Jesus Freak.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever, and basically, you see people when they get labeled, okay, well, they're a Jesus freak because they are constantly out there pushing, promoting, almost to the point where it becomes offensive. But in their mind, that's God's plan. Now, is it really God's plan or not? I don't know, because I don't know what plan the Lord has for that person.
Yeah.
But if it isn't, then what you said right then, I mean, you're not getting any rest, and you're not being fed with what you're supposed to be being fed with.
That's right. So that's a good observation, Ray. I think that's one of the main takeaways I think from that passage is there's a sense that we should be hearing God call us to activity in the world. In fact, some kind of vocation in the world, some kind of job in the world. At the same time, there's a time when work stops. There's a limit to what God's asking us to do. And I think when we don't understand that, we then make the plan into our plan, like you're saying. It becomes, instead of me being the servant, I become the master. Instead of me becoming the one who's saying, yes, Lord, it's, won't you bless me, God? It starts to kind of get inverted. Even like you said, the good things, it's a good calling, like, this is the number one sin of ministers, of worshiping ministry, of using it as an identity, right, instead of, no, that's just a tool. It's just a job. In a way, it's just a job. It's more than that, but it's still just a job. And people don't like to say that's like a sinful thing to say in ministry. It's just a job. No, it's not. It's a higher calling. It's also a job, brother. Okay, like it's not identity. Okay, like don't romanticize this so much. Right. So you're absolutely right. I think there's this sense where, like, are we really hearing God fully? Because He did say take a day off. Like He did say go to sleep. Like, so I think there's this sense of we got to make sure we're hearing everything God says, right? And I think that's the key here. To how we avoid, what's called burnout, right? And the body will break down, just like a vehicle will break down if you don't get the oil change. The engine will fail if you don't go in. Like the body will break down apart, the life will unravel, right? So you will burn out and burn up, right? So I thought this was helpful. This is kind of the context. This is why God gives the Sabbath. Okay, this is the whole purpose, because we're designed to be small, and we're designed to have boundaries, and we're designed to be limited. So if we're pushing up against that, we need to recalibrate. And so this is why He says, take a day off. So He says this in Exodus 20. And notice, God didn't say this is a suggestion. It's in the law. So this is like a rule to make sure that you do relationship with Him right. So it's not to get a relationship with Him. This is where people misunderstand this. It's to do relationship with Him well, is what it is, okay? So He says, remember the Sabbath day, keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh is a Sabbath to the Lord. You shall not do any work. For why? This is how God set up the world. He said, in 6 days He created it, and the seventh day, now again, hard to understand this here, He rested, as if He needed rest, but He rested. So notice God's design in the world sets up a work-rest pattern for life. So rest and sleep and even night aren't part of sin of any kind. It's part of the design that God's made. It's like an embedded pattern. It's like how He manufactures us. It's like how God puts humans together, needing these things, right? So there's a day to be set aside for rest. Now, most people think of Sunday just like another work day, I mean, they just disregard it, or they say, well, I can't go to church, I got to work, whatever, because my employer wants me to work, right? So obviously they're God, not God, so there's this kind of misunderstanding. So people just kind of toss it out. And then there's, on the other side, probably much less today, and certainly less in our neck of the woods, but then people kind of use that day to kind of get a one-up on God, right? Hey, God, look what I'm doing. I went to church today, and kind of use it as a bargaining chip or something, or make it really, like the letter of the law. Like, hey, I'm doing all the things right, God, and you too. Make sure you see what I'm doing here, right? So why do people misunderstand this so bad? Like, it seems pretty straightforward here, right? God's like, okay, you're made with limits. You have boundaries. You get tired. So here's how I want you to do this. Take a day off and recalibrate. I want you to rest from your work, and I want you to worship me because I made you, right? Seems pretty simple. But then either people completely avoid it, disregard it, which is sin, and then, or misuse it. Try to use it as a bargaining chip with God. Why do we get so confused about this? Why is this so challenging for people? What do you all think? I'm not saying I have the perfect answer for this. Like, why?
Right.
It just seems to be people misuse this so much.
I don't think there is a perfect answer for it.
Yeah.
I mean, even in the story of Jesus, I mean, they attempted to use the Sabbath against him.
Yes.
It was nobody works on the Sabbath. Nobody works on the Sabbath. This is a law.
Right.
If you do it, you are sinning, the ultimate sin kind of thing.
That's how that's
and, the Lord healed a person on the Sabbath. So now they wanted to use that as, okay, you're breaking your own law if you're who you really say you are.
That's right.
But like you said, the Sabbath, I personally don't think that the Sabbath is essentially a complete day or a designated day.
Yeah.
You can take the time to rest on a Sunday morning, go to church, and if there's things you need to get accomplished around your house, like mow your lawn or whatever it is, if it's something that you find relaxing or what it may be, something that's not a toil for you, but work.
Yeah.
Is it really breaking the Sabbath?
Yeah.
Like for me personally, Sunday afternoons, I get up in the morning, I go to church. Sunday afternoons, I go out and I jump on my zero-turn mower. Well, I'm a guy that likes motorized things, so being on that mower wasn't work for me. I was out there having fun, figuring out different ways to cut my grass to make it look certain ways and things like that. So, and I think that there's too many people that want to try to take the mindset that, like the ones that attacked Jesus whenever he, performed a miracle on the Sabbath, that, it's cut and dry.
That's right. That's a great point, Ray. Abby, what do you think?
Well, I think
why so much confusion?
I think the confusion is everybody has different definitions of what is work, what is rest. I mean, because even looking at like Orthodox Jews, they don't light a Hanukkah candle on the day that it lands on Shabbat, right? Mm-hmm. Like, because just lighting a candle would be defined as work, right? So what is our definition of work? Your mowing the lawn for you doesn't qualify under the definition of work, right? So then not only do people have different definitions of work, people have different definitions of rest. As a minister, Sundays probably are not very restful, right? It is full of work. If you are an introvert, going and being, even if you're not a minister, going to church on Sunday and being around all those people, even though the intention is to be in community and be worshiping the Lord, it may not be very restful for an introvert. So I think finding out what are those definitions, how can I truly find rest in God, and making time for that, and not just, I'm resting by laying in bed and scrolling on the phone. Is that rest? Right? What is rest?
Yeah.
I think what is work? What is rest? And then that would kind of, if everybody had the same definition, then I think understanding Sabbath would be a lot easier.
I think you hit it on the head. I think that the issue is the definitions of both. What is it, right? And it looks like probably from Exodus 20, some kind of rest from your work week. If I like manual labor, like your vocation, basically, is the primary issue, right? Now we can take it further than that. Most people do than that. I would say at the very basis of it, the very foundation of it, it's I am not doing my normal job that day. For me, it's Saturday. I have 2 jobs, but I don't work on Saturday. I don't work. I don't do pretty much either one of them. And so I do other things. So I think the basic principle is you're taking a break from doing those things you do 6 of the days of the week. I think that's the most basic principle. Now, can you go further than that? Yes. I think you can probably say it's trying to not engage in anything you do during the week that you typically do. Like if I go out to eat 3 times a week, I probably don't go out to eat on Saturday. Now, that's my personal conviction. I'm trying to take a break from my normal rhythms so I can actually have recreation. And I don't believe recreation like Ray was talking about, even as I'm a Presbyterian even. And that's considered a no-no. But in my view, recreation is part of rest. It's a recreation thing you're doing to rejuvenate yourself. I think that's part of what rest is meaning too. So it's not just playing games wrong. No, that's part of renewing yourself. Now, if you're playing games every single day, I don't think that that's exactly what Sabbath is supposed to be used for. So that's just my thought. But again, it's taking a break from the rhythms that you already have established of almost everything else and just doing some different things. So to me, it's more the spirit of what God's intending here in general. But there's also the principle of if I've got vocations I'm setting those aside for 1 day a week, right? So there's a little bit of a letter of the law there, but it's not just that. And I wouldn't, which is what the Pharisees do. They expand it to any kind of activity at all is work. Don't think so, because Jesus said no.
Yeah.
Jesus said nope. So Jesus healed a guy, so that work is considered fine. That work was a mercy-based work. See? And other things, like if you got to drive your aunt to the hospital because they're dying, that's a work. But it's a work of necessity, right? There are certain things that are necessary on the day. So it's not no work at all. Clearly, it's certain kinds of work that God wants us to lay aside. Now, it's not because God's saying, you're bad if you don't. It's for your good. It's to help you recalibrate. You're going to break down if you don't. So I think it's really more of a practical law in a lot of ways, but then it's also meant to give you liturgy. We use that word to recalibrate yourself to worship. Because if you're working, Ray knows this, right? If you're working 60 days in a row, you start to work and worship work, whether you like it or not. Whether you like it or not, you're worshiping it. Whether you hate it, you despise it, whatever it is, it's becoming your worship. And God's like, that's not how life is supposed to be. Work is a tool and a vocation. It is not a liturgy, a worship of God. So I think it's just, again, it's really meant for our good. And we mess it up because definitions, number one, is a problem, like you're saying. But then 2, just the demands of life encroach and then starts to redefine what life is about, I think. So that's my thought.
Well, I think sometimes, like, for example, I use myself. I love my job.
Yeah.
So it's really not work to me.
Yeah.
So, if I have to work 30 days in a row, I love what I do.
Yeah.
It's not work. But, just like you said, then now it becomes the main focus.
That's right.
It becomes everything.
And
if you look at the hierarchy, or if you want to call it that, of how the Lord expected us to live our life, work's not even in the top 3.
Yeah, that's right.
So if we put it above all those other things, look at what we're going against. We're putting it in front of the Lord. We're putting it in front of our family. We're putting it in front of our church.
That's right.
Which are all things that He told us are more important than actually going to work. So, and it also goes back to, some people use the term that money is the root of all evil. Well, that's an incorrect statement. Just the love of money.
That's right.
That's
it's loving it. That's right.
So if you love it more than you do other, and it goes with anything. Yeah. If you love food more than you love anything else, it becomes a sin kind of thing. Right. So and that's where it becomes difficult as an individual, because how do I fathom the fact that, hey, I'm sinning because I love my job?
Right.
Well, you're not sinning because you love your job.
That's right.
You're sinning because the job you love you put in front of everything else.
That's right. It's a priority issue. It's exactly right, Ray. It doesn't mean work is not meant to be toilsome. It is meant to be purposeful, and it's supposed to be a shaping thing that God wants us to use to cultivate our own lives and the world around us, to benefit our neighbor. God set up commerce in a good way. These are good things, but it's when we use it as the number one in our lives, that's when it becomes a major problem to God. And when we don't let that day calibrate and recalibrate, it starts to become our God, and it becomes our sustenance. That's why it says if you try to build a city without God, it just becomes toil. And that stands for basically anything in your life that you're trying to build. So I think there's this sense of God's trying to protect us from ourselves here, and from, I think, the sinful patterns that can develop when we say no to his design and we start to break those boundaries. And that's, again, in the gardens, what Satan's tempting us to do, to say, live outside the boundaries. Right. Don't follow God here. He doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't care about you. He's trying to hold back on you. No. He's giving us exactly what we need. And Satan's trying to get us to go where we don't need to go. So there's this sense of God knows best for us, right? And, it's like when you tell your kids to go to bed at night, it's good for you to sleep. I know you're small and you need 12 hours. Go to bed, please. No. It's like the greatest villain of all time they're fighting, right? And they need it. And then I remember my oldest daughter's 10, went to bed at 7:30 a few nights ago, earlier than normal. We try to get them to go to bed by 8:30. She goes to bed at 7:30, wakes up at 6:30, whatever, we go to school. She was like, Dad, was the best morning I've ever had. I'm like, it's because you slept long enough,
I'm glad you discovered that.
You figure that out, right? It's like, because your body needs that much sleep. That's why I keep telling you to go to bed that time, right? Mm-hmm. And so there's this sense of like, God knows what we need because he knows kind of how we're made. And he's the one who created us. So there's this sense of, it's love, really is what it is. It's loving for him to give us the day off. He's a good boss. And it's loving because we are, we need oil. We need recalibration. He wants to heal us and help us kind of recalibrate our lives. So Sunday is really for renewal, recreation, and rest, not just don't work. We're hearing that wrong if that's what we're thinking about it. But I'll finish with this. I just love what Jesus says. It's my favorite passage of the Bible. I think it's probably most people's favorite passage, or at least most memorable. And he engages this subject along with some others in this incredible invitation to himself. Jesus invites us to himself for these reasons. This is what he says in Matthew 11. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden. Those are different things. And I will give you rest for both. Take my yoke, that's work. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, my burden is light. This is just power-packed with answers from God. He's saying, look, I know you're tired. Come to me and find rest. Look, I know you're weary from sin and misery of sin. Come to me and I can heal you. Then he says, take my yoke. Now, see, that's the interesting part. He didn't just say, come find rest. He says, find a new purpose. He says, take this yoke. Yoke, that's work. See, he didn't say no work. Mm-hmm. So he says, take the yoke upon me and you'll find that my way is lighter, easier. So beautiful, because I think for the most part in our lives, if we're in this hustle culture, work is a tyrant. Never says enough. Never says, that was good enough. Never says rest. Never says, I love you. Nope. God says, I love you. I have a better purpose for you. Take this upon you. And this is better, right? That feels better, right? That fits better, right? Like, that's what he's saying. He's saying, and not only will I give you this yoke, when you mess up, it won't condemn you. I won't send you to hell. Whereas everything else, it will. It will definitely send you to hell. It will not satisfy God's law. You break the law, it condemns you. You fail people, you're out with them. Like, it's very different. So God's saying, not only will I give you rest physically, I'll give you rest spiritually and purpose in all of this. And then Jesus, I love what he says. He says at the very end, my yoke is easy, my burden is light. So yeah, you're going to have it on your shoulders, but it's not the same kind of weight. So this, again, what we're trying to say here is ultimately rest is not about a day. It's about a person. And that's really what the Bible is getting at for us. The day is more of a memorial to help us kind of practice the rest. But ultimately, it's about God who is our rest. So do I need rest? Come to God. Do I need to go work? Well, work out of the joy I have from the rest I just had, right? You get up in the morning after you slept, you're ready to work. Same's true. You go to church on Sunday, hopefully you're like, I remember that it's not up to me. God's got it all. All I got to do is just obey him. And then it's like, it's gravy. So I think that's what he's trying to tell us there. And that's really a saving truth from a hustle culture and just a tyranny of work. So I hope that's an encouragement to you all. I really appreciate Abby wanting to talk about this subject because it's a challenging one. But it's very practical, though. It's extremely practical as well. And I think if we change our mindset on this, it's very healing in this kind of culture where we feel like, am I doing enough? The answer from the culture is no. The answer from God is it's already done. It's very different, right? So appreciate you, Ray, being here this morning. Appreciate you, Abby, being here this morning with me and working through this question. And for anyone who's listening, again, I want to encourage you to go to our website, crossautomotiveroyale.com, to learn more about our mission, to learn more about business inquiries that you might have, or even ministry partnerships that we have available. Hope you'll check that out. Like and subscribe our channel. Leave any comments that you have. We'd love to answer those as well. Until episode 8, signing off.